Welcome to the Episode 5 of The Road to Super Smash Bros., the show where we look at all of the characters' journeys up to the 1999 hit game. In our last episode, we looked at the most important month in the history of video games with the creation of the Nintendo Famicom, and the creation of Luigi, who joined his brother Mario and Donkey Kong on this journey. This week, we're going to finish off the year 1983 as Japan continues to rise as a video game powerhouse and the United States suffers a crash that nearly kills gaming. We're going to begin on September 9th as a new Famicom game was released. Once again, it's just another port of an arcade game. This time, it's the 2-month-old Mario Brothers. As with the other ports, the graphics here are sharp. The character sprites match up well to those of their arcade counterparts. The foreground looks good. The POW block operates properly as it disappears a little bit each time you use it until it's all gone. And the pipe in the background looks good as well. The controls are fantastic and it still allows for 2 players to play at the same time. The only thing missing from the arcade game is the cutscenes. And all the cutscenes did was explain how to beat a new enemy when it was introduced in the game. For the home console, the way they did that is they just put it in the booklet that comes with the games. So you weren't missing any materials here. Overall, the port demonstrates the power of the Nintendo Famicom and how good this system could be. We're going to take a rewind for a minute though, because while the Nintendo Famicom came out in July, it was clearly a really good system. Nintendo's name wasn't known in the US still, and they wanted to break into the US market. So they decided that the best way to do this was to reach out to a company that had exposure. And so they decided to reach out to Atari to try to get the Nintendo consoles released in America. Negotiations with Atari were going well, and a contract was in place that both companies liked. And just as they were about to sign, Atari saw a Coleco version of the game Donkey Kong that was released on their Adams computer, and Atari was furious. You can see in our previous games that Coleco had an agreement with Nintendo to license Donkey Kong for the video game consoles. But what we didn't mention is that, well, Coleco had the video game console license. Atari actually had the license to the computers, to computer games. And Coleco's Adams, it was a computer. And so Atari was extremely upset to see this. Nintendo complained to Coleco, trying to address the problem. Coleco argued that the Adams was a console, but eventually they did concede it was a computer and agreed to stop producing Donkey Kong. So Nintendo had righted the ship, and so they reached back out to Atari. But by the time they reached back out, Atari's president, who they'd been working with, Ray Kassar, had been fired. And this ended the negotiations between Atari and Nintendo. Despite this, Atari still received the license to the Mario Bros. Game. And this was done because Nintendo didn't have the ability to show off the game in America, so they needed someone to do it for them. It was done in spite of low game sales in America at the time. Again, systems were struggling. Atari put Mario Bros. Out for both of their 2 systems. We're going to start with the Atari 2600. Again, the system originally came out in 1977, and it's just not able to produce the level of game as you would see on the Nintendo Famicom. As we'd seen before with Atari 2600 ports of arcade games, the graphics for Mario and Luigi, the main characters, aren't bad, but they're not that good either. You can tell the creatures apart, but again, the graphics just are weak. The foreground lacks any quality or design. The warp pipes are just green blocks. The POW block is a line that changes color as it's used. The coins are square, and they're odd colors as well, kind of a brownish. Despite all this, the poor graphics don't really affect the quality of gameplay. While the graphics may not have been great, what Atari was good at was getting good gameplay out of their games. Now, one item of gameplay is different, and that's the sidestepper. This is a character that needed to be hit twice, And in the arcade and in the Famicom, the way it demonstrated it had been hit once is a change in its facial expression, so you only needed to hit it one more time. Now the Atari 2600 just couldn't handle that, so it looked the same the entire time. If you hit it twice in the same run, you could kill it. But if it had made it all the way to the warp pipe and it came back out, you were going to have to hit it twice again. It just couldn't handle that much intelligence. So that is basically one major change that the Atari went through. Ultimately, another thing is to try to avoid getting too deep into the game. Flames that were designed to make sure you were finishing levels quick enough came out a whole lot quicker than they did in the arcade, provided a little bit more of a challenge to this version, but ultimately, again, it kind of tried to limit the number of levels that they had. Meanwhile, they also released for their much more advanced 5200, and that system had come out in November of '82, so it was new. It was closer to a third-generation system than a second-generation system. On the 5200, Mario's details are better, but he actually might be a little bit more accurate on the 2600, to be perfectly truthful. The enemies are much better. The sidestepper is able to have different facial expressions and only needs to be hit twice, even if he travels through the pipe, just like in the arcade and in the Famicom. So while the foreground has some details, the graphics definitely still do not live up to that of the Famicom. The pipes actually look fantastic. The POW block works as it's supposed to, again disappearing each time it's used. The coins are much better looking as well. They actually look like coins. So even though this game's better than the 2600, what it does is it shows the inferiority of the 5200 compared to the Nintendo Famicom. The popularity of Mario Brothers wouldn't carry this game to much success because, again, the gaming market just wasn't doing well in the United States. Even with the Famicom in place in Japan, Nintendo wasn't ready to give up on the arcade games yet. They weren't that confident in the home market. So in October, they completed the Donkey Kong trilogy by releasing Donkey Kong 3 on the arcade. In our previous video, we discussed the Game & Watch game Greenhouse. This game serves as the basis for Donkey Kong 3. Leaving behind platformers for a shooter, Donkey Kong 3 follows Stanley the Bugman as he tries to protect his plants from insects. Stanley has 5 plants beneath him that he must protect. Donkey Kong hangs from 2 ropes at the top of the greenhouse. Donkey Kong stirs up angry insects that try to grab the plants. Stanley can beat the stage by killing every bug or by spraying Donkey Kong to the top of the screen, the latter of which is definitely the much easier option. The game features 3 stages in total. You earn the last one by beating the game one time through. The first stage features 3 levels, or 3 floors, for Stanley to jump up on. As the stage begins, Stanley jumps up to the top and sprays DK to the top of the screen. You can do this quick enough that you don't even have to worry about the bugs that DK releases, as you just jump twice and start shooting. The second stage has 3 floors like the first, but the middle floor is cut in pieces, and the middle piece is missing. So in order to get to the top to shoot Donkey Kong, Stanley must run to the side and jump up, and then jump back into the middle. This time around, that causes enough of a delay that the bugs are going to be able to reach the plants. So you actually have to spend some time killing the bugs before worrying about pushing Donkey Kong to the top of the screen. Otherwise, they'll at least grab some of the bugs and hurt your point total. The last level only features 2 floors, and so the spray that Stanley has isn't enough to shoot Donkey Kong. So he actually has to jump and shoot Donkey Kong, again causing enough of a delay that the bugs are going to make an impact. And so you're going to have to deal with the bugs at some point in time. If you do get Donkey Kong all the way to the top, this time he doesn't climb off screen like he does in the others, but instead he gets his head stuck in a jar and he tumbles to the ground. Of course, being an arcade game, the game is not over. It starts back over from the beginning because your goal is ultimately to rack up as many points as possible. There are 3 types of bugs that Stanley has to deal with throughout the course of this game. There's the simple bugs that die when you shoot them. There are bugs that explode when they get shot, which means they do die, but their pieces fly at you and you have to try to avoid those pieces. And then there are also worms that freeze in place when shot. So, in some of these levels, as you're trying to shoot Donkey Kong, if you shoot a worm and then it freezes in front of you, you can't hit Donkey Kong anymore. So you have to go and concentrate on the bugs until the worm unfreezes and moves out of your way. So you need to try to actually freeze them before they get in your way, so you can keep hitting Donkey Kong as many times as possible. Now there is a super sprayer that makes the levels pretty easy, but it's only available once per life. The super sprayer kills all of the bugs, and it shoots far enough that you don't have to worry about jumping and everything else, and it shoots fast enough that you can get Donkey Kong off the screen super quick. The problem is it's available right away in the game, and you don't really need it in the first level. But if you don't use it, it won't come back until you die. So you have to grab it, and if you go really fast, you'll actually have it at the beginning of the second stage as well. But again, once it runs out, it's out. So then you're on your own again until you die. So it is a really good weapon, but again, it's only temporary. So with this, the Donkey Kong trilogy came to an end. It would actually be the last major release for Donkey Kong until the mid-90s, over a decade later. So Mario's going to become a franchise character for Nintendo, and Donkey Kong's going to essentially be put on the shelf with just some Game & Watch releases and some re-releases of these arcade games to come in the next 10 years. Nintendo wasn't done with their Game & Watch series. On October 7th, their next release hit store shelves. These would be panoramic games. The panoramic console resembles a Game Boy, but had a cover on the screen. When the console is opened, it produces a reflection that artificially produces color on the screen. It's the same technology used in the tabletop version of the Game & Watch. The advantage of the panoramic console was its portability over that of the tabletops. And it's a true handheld console, unlike the tabletops as well. The newest release would be Donkey Kong Jr. The game was already released as a widescreen in 1982, as a vertical dual screen titled Donkey Kong 2, and as a tabletop, both of those being earlier in 1983. All 3 versions were unique, despite being based on the same game. The panoramic version, however, was just a clone of the tabletop version that had been released earlier in the year. So if you'd like to learn more about that, check out our previous video. On November 13th, they released another panoramic game for the Game & Watch. This one was titled Mario's Bombs Away. In this game, Mario is in the army. He must take a bomb from one ally on the left to another on the right. His pal will light the bomb and toss it on a tree. Mario must carry the bomb high or low. If he carries it high, there are 5 enemies hiding behind those trees, waiting to light the fuse of his bomb. If they do, Mario will run back to the base and the bomb will blow up on him and his friend, and the game restarts. If you carry it low, you run the risk of an enemy soldier setting gas on fire, and that would also light the fuse, causing Mario to run back to the base and the bomb exploding and restarting the entire game. So, as you move past, you must move the bomb up and down to avoid any enemies who try to come out from under the trees and enemies lighting the gasoline on fire. And so, if you can make it to the end and to your friend without any other enemies setting it on fire, he'll light it and toss it on top of the tree, eliminating one of the enemies. If you get all 5 of the enemies taken off screen, then you win the game. If you fail in the mission, all progress except your points are lost. Meaning, even though if you give up, they give you multiple lives, the game must essentially be beat in one turn. Once defeated, the 5 bombs will go off over each tree, and you see the enemies bombed. In December, we did return to the arcade with Nintendo. Nintendo's newest game would be Punch-Out! This game's actually going to be covered more in a future season of this channel, but we do want to check out right now is that in the crowd, if you pay attention to what's going on there, the sharp-eyed gamer will notice that Mario and Donkey Kong are sitting there watching the fighters in their matches. It demonstrates Nintendo's realization that these two were going to be primary characters to build their company around. We're going to finish the year on December 12th with the release of Donkey Kong Jr. Math for the Nintendo Famicom. Nintendo set out to prove the value of the system by producing educational games. They took each of the 3 launch titles and decided to turn Donkey Kong into a music game with a piano peripheral. The game never came to pass, so there's nothing more to talk about that one. Popeye was a translation game turning Japanese into English. This one did get released, but it was never sent to the US because Nintendo felt US gamers wouldn't want to learn Japanese. So, the only one we need to focus on here is Donkey Kong Jr. Math. There were 2 game modes available. The first was a race between 2 players. The screen is actually based off of the first stage of Donkey Kong Jr. with vines and islands. Donkey Kong sits at the top of the stage and gives you a number. Each side has numbers 1 through 9, and at the bottom are the 4 operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The player must use Donkey Kong Jr. to grab a number, then an operation, and another number, and keep going until they produce the original number that Donkey Kong laid out for them at the beginning of the stage. The first one to complete the goal was the winner. The other gaming option was a level based on the final stage. You choose a type of math problem you would like. The problem appears on screen, and you must climb the chains and point to the number that goes in each column. When you get the answer and you go and push the key into the lock to lock in your answer, you get your point total. And with that, Nintendo was now an educational tool. And so 1983 came to an end. Nintendo was not yet clearly dominant company in gaming, but they were definitely closing in. Meanwhile, in the United States, gaming companies were trying to deny the crash, and many games were released throughout 1983. But that was coming to an end, and 1984 would demonstrate the death of the gaming industry in America. Tune in next week as we watch Nintendo's rise to video console giant in 1984.